Marigold Hastings had never thought of herself as much of a risk-taker. But moving to Meadowbrook turned out to be one of the boldest decisions of her life. After years of struggling in the city, taking on odd jobs and commissions that never panned out, she finally decided that her grandmother's old cottage was the perfect place to rekindle her artistic spirit. The cottage, tucked among blooming hedgerows and rolling hills, sat on a quiet lane near a trickling stream. From the moment Marigold set eyes on the front garden, overrun by wildflowers and the crooked picket fence, she felt a kind of mystical invitation. It sang to her sense of creativity the moment she turned the key in the rusty lock. Settling in was easy enough. She painted the walls a soft sage green, the better to reflect the gentle morning light that filtered through the old mullioned windows. She filled the shelves with her paints and brushes, her battered art textbooks, and a few decorative knickknacks gleaned from second-hand shops in the village. Her days fluttered by serenely. Breakfast on the porch, an hour or two spent mixing paints and trying new techniques, then a leisurely stroll to town for groceries or a trip to the local library in the evenings. The hush of the countryside lulled her to bed early, a comforting hush she found more conducive to creativity than the bustling noise of her former life in the city. One rainy afternoon, after a particularly unsatisfying attempt at painting an old oak tree in her yard, Marigold closed her sketchbook and decided to rummage through the cottage's attic. The estate agent who had handled her grandmother's affairs told her that the cottage had its share of nooks and crannies, and that there might be hidden treasures, or at very least amusing items of yesteryear stored away. Perhaps she would discover some old postcards, or maybe an antique mirror that would be perfect for her next still-life composition. With a lantern in one hand and curiosity pulling her forward, she climbed the narrow stairs into the attic. Dust motes swirled in the beams of her lantern, twirling like tiny galaxies as she surveyed the cramped space. A few old boxes were stacked precariously in a corner. She inched her way toward them, bracing herself against the rafters, and began to sift through their contents. They mainly contained clothing from past decades, moth-eaten dresses and hats that had long lost their shape. Beneath the ancient garments, she found a heavy wooden chest. The hinges squeaked in protest when she finally pried the lid open, revealing a collection of letters bound with twine. The handwriting was spidery and elegant, each page filled with tales of travel and longing. Fascinated, Marigold read a few lines before she noticed something odd about the inside of the chest. The base looked thicker than expected. Tapping along the bottom, she realized it was false. She used the corner of a paint scraper to pry it up, dislodging a hidden latch. With a sudden click, the false bottom sprung away, revealing a battered old key resting on a small folded note. The note read, "For the room no one knows." Despite a chill that crept down her spine at these words, her curiosity burned brighter than any feeling of unease. She held the key, turning it over in her palm while trying to puzzle its meaning. The cottage was small. She had explored every inch, from the kitchen to the attic. There was no empty room to be found. But Meadowbrook's cottages were known for their quirks, so maybe there was indeed some hidden nook. The next few days, Marigold found herself scanning every corner of the cottage. She made a meticulous survey, lightly rapping on walls to see if anything sounded hollow, rummaging behind old panels that might hide a secret passage. However, her search yielded nothing. Frustrated but not ready to give up, she paid a visit to Fiona Linden, the elderly librarian who had grown up in Meadowbrook. Fiona was known for her local law expertise, and she greeted Marigold with a gentle smile when she arrived, inquiring after her painting progress, before settling down to talk about the significance of secret rooms in older homes. "I remember your grandmother once talking about a hidden corridor, dear, but it was all in passing," Fiona said, sipping her tea. "She mentioned something about a space behind the fireplace, but I can't be certain. Cottages around here can be full of surprises. Your best bet might be old records at the town registrar's office." Bolstered by Fiona's advice, Marigold took a trip to the dull, ivy-coated building at the edge of the village. She scrolled through years of property records, but nothing about hidden spaces emerged. Nonetheless, her determination grew. Back at the cottage, she reconsidered Fiona's mention of the fireplace. The cottage had a stone hearth occupying most of one living room wall, a hearth that Marigold had never fully examined. With her sleeves rolled up and a flashlight in hand, she shone light around the edges of the fireplace's interior. One small section of mortar looked different, crumbly and loosely packed. Kneeling, she gently worked at it with a screwdriver, heart pounding at the prospect of discovery. After a few minutes, the mortar dislodged. She removed loose chunks of stone, and behind them found a narrow iron door rusted at the hinges. Her breath caught in her throat. She retrieved the key from her pocket, and to her astonishment, it fit perfectly into the keyhole, turning with a reluctant groan. Slowly she pulled the door open and found herself gazing into a cramped room with scarcely enough space to stand. Dust and cobwebs clung to every surface. A single lantern sat on a small wooden stool, and a trunk occupied the back corner. Above it hung a delicate tapestry, depicting a flowering meadow. Marigold coughed as she inched inside, the air thick with a musty odour of long unopened spaces. She flicked on her flashlight and swept it around. On the wall, hidden under a layer of mildew, she began to make out sketches, faces, sceneries, architectural drawings, the lines expertly done, reminiscent of an artist's portfolio. A tingle ran through her. Was the previous occupant also an artist? She shone her flashlight on the trunk, noticing an ornate lock that was different from the doors. She tried the iron key, but it didn't fit. Dusting the top, she saw an inscription. The answer lies in riddles, each step a brush stroke upon fate. Over the next few days, Marigold found it impossible to focus on anything else. Who had left these drawings, and why? She carefully brushed away dirt from the sketches, discovering they depicted scenes from Meadowbrook. A pond near the old mill, the spire of St. Hildegard's church, a narrow footbridge at the edge of town. Each turned out to be labelled with peculiar symbols: a stylized fox in the corner of the pond's drawing, a tiny rose on the churches, and a swirling wave near the bridge. A cryptic note pinned to the tapestry read, "Seek the secret beneath the blossoming oak. Follow the fox, sly track." Puzzled, Marigold ventured to the pond first, as it seemed the easiest clue. A fox next to the pond. She took her sketchbook along to replicate the vantage point the hidden room's artwork had depicted. Once she determined that vantage exactly, she searched the spot for anything unusual: hollows in the tree trunks, markings on the stones, or perhaps a buried box. After nearly an hour, she noticed a shallow depression in the earth near a large oak that was indeed blossoming with white clusters. Carefully excavating the soft soil with her borrowed trowel, she found an old tin container, its lid etched with a fox. Heart thudding, she pried it open, revealing a small cloth pouch. Inside that pouch was a second key on a brass ring, accompanied by a single slip of paper that read, "Next to the Rose's Spire." The Rose's Spire could only refer to St. Hildegard's church, where the note had pictured a rose near the tower. St. Hildegard's date back centuries and was known for an ancient garden behind the sacristy, blossoming with heritage roses every spring. Marigold arrived at the church just as the early afternoon sun glossed the stained glass windows. She approached the priest, Father Benedict, who was busily trimming hedges along the path. He was more than happy to let her explore the church grounds. She strolled carefully, eyes peeled for any sign or symbol resembling a rose. Sure enough, behind a cluster of rose bushes near the side gate, she noticed a similarly loose patch of soil. Pressing aside the thorns, she began to dig. It didn't take long to unearth a neatly folded scrap of oilcloth. Inside lay another slip of paper, this one with a riddle. "The wave beckons where the water runs low. Follow the steps in humility's row." Marigold recognized this clue as referring to the footbridge near the shallower part of Meadowbrook stream, where the water runs low. The wave symbol was in that corner of the drawing she had seen in the hidden chamber, so this had to be the place. The next morning, she awoke under the soft drizzle typical of Meadowbrook skies. Slinging a waterproof jacket over her shoulder, she made her way toward the footbridge. She felt a thrill of anticipation. Somehow, she sensed that this final clue might yield the trunk's key. Each step across the arched wooden bridge made her heart pound. She crouched at the edge, testing stones for a hidden compartment. Eventually, a loose stone dislodged, revealing a tiny recess. She angled her fingers inside and pulled out a miniature wooden box. Inside was indeed a key, small and aged with a twisted handle. Beneath it lay one more note. My final gift lies waiting in the room of solitude. Turn the key and find your purpose. Eager to solve the mystery, Marigold ran back to the cottage, water droplets dripping from her jacket. She slipped inside, pried the iron door open once more, and breathed in the silent air of the hidden chamber. Approaching the trunk, she carefully turned the newly obtained key. It clicked softly as the lid sprang open. Inside she discovered several rolled parchments, each sealed with wax, alongside a collection of paintbrushes, dried tubes of exquisite-sounding paint, and a thick, leather-bound journal. The journal's cover bore the initials R.W. As she leafed through it, her eyes widened. The pages revealed theories on painting techniques, color mixing, and experiments on capturing Meadowbrook's light in different seasons. Interspersed through the writing were the previous owner's reflections on life, poignant musings on solitude, love, and the desire to create something that transcends time. A folded sheet of paper fell out from among the journal's last pages. It read, "To you who have found this, the rewards of creativity lie in the courage to see possibility where others see stone. May these brushes and formulas bring you the spark that once guided my hand. Let your art be a testament to the hidden beauty the world offers, if only we look for it." Marigold's vision blurred with tears. She realized that whoever this R.W. man was, they must have lived as a passionate recluse, devoting themselves to art and leaving behind a treasure trove of knowledge and hope. She carefully wrapped the brushes, noting the softness of the bristles even after all these years. Some were sable, others synthetic, each with a surprising sense of quality and care. She flipped through more of the journal. One passage read, "Even as my hands age, I am compelled to capture the fleeting moments. My sketches live longer than my regrets. Yet if I disappear without sharing, all of this fades into dust. So I leave them hidden for a soul who aches for creation. May you see the world's wonders, bright and shimmering." Days passed in a dreamy blur. Marigold spent hours at her easel, experimenting with the gift of new brushes and the paint formulas R.W. had painstakingly recorded. She prepared the pigments exactly as recommended, mixing them with homemade mediums gleaned from the notes, enthralled by the luminosity they produced. The colors gave her new pieces of depth she had never before achieved. In the quiet hours of the night, she pored over the journal, learning not only painting methods, but also gleaning wisdom about the creative journey. Word traveled quickly around Meadowbrook in that subtle, neighborly way. People noticed how her paintings seemed more vibrant and alive. No one knew exactly how she had undergone such a transformation, and Marigold wasn't prone to gossip. She merely let the mystery stay hidden, much as she had found it. Sometimes, though, she would discuss it quietly with Fiona or share bits of insight with Father Benedict, both of whom were immensely supportive. Rumours swirled that perhaps the ghost of an old artist haunted the cottage, imparting priceless lessons in the stillness of night. Marigold, for her part, found that explaining the secret trunk and hidden chamber was more complicated than letting the rumour mill spin. All was peaceful until one afternoon when an unexpected visitor arrived at her door. A burly man with a bristly grey beard, wearing rumpled clothes and clutching an old portfolio under his arm. introduced himself as Dalton Winslow. He claimed to be a distant relative of the property's previous owner. Marigold felt her pulse quicken. How had he known about her discovery? He insisted they speak privately, eyes glinting with an unreadable determination. Although cautious, Marigold invited him inside. Dalton explained that R.W. stood for Rufus Winslow, his great-uncle, who had vanished from public life many decades ago. Rufus was rumoured to have left behind an unpublished groundbreaking guide to colour theory, one that many in the art world believed never existed. Dalton said he had scoured countless archives, trying to locate any remnants of Rufus's life. When he heard that the old cottage had come into Marigold's possession, he suspected she might stumble across something. "If you found anything that belonged to Uncle Rufus," Dalton said, shifting somewhat nervously, "I'd be grateful if you returned it. After all, it's my family's legacy." Marigold wasn't sure what to do. The journal was indeed Rufus Winslow's magnum opus, and it felt almost sacrilegious to part with the man's final gift. Yet a sliver of guilt gnawed at her. If Dalton was telling the truth, the rightful place for Rufus's legacy might be with his family. But something about Dalton set her nerves on edge. His sudden appearance, his stealthy glances, and his urgent tone. She noticed shadows shifting in his eyes, as though he desired more than just a family heirloom. She made a neutral comment saying that she'd look into anything she might have found. He nodded, left his business card, and departed, leaving her with a lingering sense of unease. She confided in Fiona and Father Benedict, both of whom advised caution. Fiona warned, "The Winslow family was never close. If Rufus wanted someone in his family to have the journal, he would have left clearer instructions. You found it and unlocked its secrets. Perhaps you should keep it until you feel certain of your choice." Torn and anxious, Marigold flipped again through Rufus's entries, searching for any mention of Dalton or other family members. Eventually she found a note that read, "I asked my nephew to appreciate art, but he was always more interested in its value than its meaning. The day he sold my watercolor series behind my back, I realized I could no longer trust him. I shall conceal my greatest works so that they do not become mere currency in another's hands." It didn't mention Dalton by name, but the reference to selling paintings implied a breach of trust within the family. Marigold's mind was made up. Rufus's hidden trove was not something that would benefit from being turned into a mere commodity. If Dalton truly had an interest in preserving the family's artistic legacy, there might be a gentler path, perhaps a curated exhibit in Meadow Brook, where the beauty of Rufus's work would remain in the public eye, rather than locked away in some distant auction or private collection. With resolve in her heart, she decided she would only part with the journal if she could ensure the spirit in which it was written endured. To buy time, she invited Dalton to tea, saying she wanted to discuss the possibility of an exhibit. Dalton arrived with ill-disguised impatience. As she revealed her idea, placing Rufus's sketches and notes in a local exhibition so that his vision could inspire others, Dalton's face hardened. He demanded the papers outright, his tone turning menacing. Marigold's heart drummed with fear at the confrontation, but she refused, citing Rufus's own words about ensuring his art did not become a mere commodity. Dalton threatened legal action if she didn't hand over everything. Standing her ground, she mentioned that the property was rightfully hers, and the items found within it had been abandoned decades ago. Unwilling to negotiate further, Dalton stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Immediately, Marigold sank into a chair, her pulse galloping. She called Fiona for guidance, and Fiona reassured her that in Meadowbrook people rallied around a good cause. If Dalton tried anything, the entire community would stand up against him. Still, in the days that followed, Marigold glanced over her shoulder more than once. The hush of the cottage at night seemed charged with questions. Every so often, she heard footsteps outside or glimpsed a figure in the garden, though she was never sure it was Dalton. She did her best to continue painting, pouring her gratitude and awe into each canvas. She also worked discreetly with Father Benedict and Fiona, drafting a plan to hold a small exhibition showcasing Rufus's sketches, colour formulas and notes, and homage to his vision. Evening finally arrived for the opening of the modest exhibit, held in the town's historic meeting hall. Locals came out in droves, all curious about the reclusive painter whose legacy Marigold had unearthed. The hall came alive with conversations about art and the secrets that dwell in old cottages. Fiona gave a brief speech highlighting Rufus's dedication and how Marigold's determination had unlocked not only a hidden room, but new perspectives for the entire community. Then Marigold stepped up to share her reflections. She spoke of patience, discovery, and the sense of profound connection she felt to Rufus's artistic spirit. How each page of his journal guided her hands and reminded her why she loved to create. Much to her relief, Dalton did not appear to disrupt the evening. Perhaps he realized that the community's pride in this discovery outweighed any potential financial gain he might extract. Or maybe he'd recognized that further confrontation would bruise his own reputation. Whatever the case, the exhibit unfolded beautifully. Father Benedict's face was lit with pride as he introduced visitors to Rufus's intricate sketches of church architecture. Villagers reminisced about the old days, and many who had brushed elbows with the Winslow family shared half-whispered stories of Rufus's intense artistry. As the night drew to a close, Marigold stood before the exhibit's centerpiece, a large display featuring the trunk itself, the battered journal, and a few of Rufus's best-preserved sketches. She felt a calming sense of fulfillment. She realized she had done more than just inherit a cottage. She had rekindled a creative vision that had been sealed away in darkness for far too long. In the weeks that followed, Marigold noticed a quiet but meaningful change in her own painting. There was a subtler nuance to her lighting, a newfound confidence in her brushstrokes. She even made a few sales at the exhibit, enough to sustain her modest cottage life. More importantly, she developed a sense of belonging in Meadowbrook. She was no longer just an aspiring artist who'd stumbled upon a mystery. She was part of the community, part of a shared story that bridged the past and the future. Though she still sometimes shivered at the memory of Dalton's threats, she refused to live in fear. The hidden room, now thoroughly cleaned, had been transformed into a small private studio where she could slip away whenever she needed peace. She kept the tapestry, the trunk, and the sketches there, feeling Rufus's presence almost tangibly, guiding her hand. Each morning she woke to the gentle light of Meadowbrook, pulled on her boots and set out into the garden or the surrounding hills to capture the nuances of sunrise. In her heart she carried Rufus's final words, "May you see the world's wonders, bright and shimmering." And each evening, as she returned home to her snug cottage, she allowed the mystery and magic of that hidden space to shape her paintings, one brushstroke at a time, confident that the shocking secrets, once locked away, now softly illuminated her future. No matter what else might come, Marigold knew she had found both refuge and inspiration in Meadowbrook. The hidden room's ghosts had been laid to rest with kindness and respect, and a small part of an enigmatic artist's spirit lived on in every artwork she completed. She had embraced the quiet adventure of solving riddles and unraveling an old enigma, only to realize that, in the end, it led her to the greatest revelation of all. Her own artistic voice, stronger and clearer than ever before.